in Objection to Maoist Accusations against Hoxha of dogmato-revisionism and their lackluster understanding of his analysis, by RedPandaRevolutionary. In the not-so-aptly titled work, quote, What is Hoxhaism? Debunking Hoxhaite Claims, end quote, my comrades, if I dare call them so, at Maoist Student Collective have published this article where they levy accusation of Hoxhaism being anti-revisionist to the point of revisionism, or quote-unquote dogmato-revisionism, as one Maoist group, the RCP-USA, not to be confused with the Trotskyists at RCA, says. Regardless, we shall go through this article and tackle most points presented, and try to avoid such pomposity as to claim we have quote-unquote debunked this or that. For this essay, I will quote sections 1 and 2 in full. Quote, Section 1. Can the Chinese Revolution be called a proletarian revolution? This book, written by Enver Hoxha, claims that the Chinese Revolution was led by the peasantry rather than the proletariat. This argument is often used by Hoxhaists. The claim is partly true, since around 80 through 90% of the Chinese population during the Republican and Kuomintang era were peasants. The peasantry had existed in China for thousands of years. The revolution was led by both proletarians and peasants. However, the proletariat was a minority at the time, as pre-Mao China was largely agrarian and had not yet developed significant industry. During Chairman Mao's era, many peasants were transformed into proletarians. It is important to note that the Chinese economy was based on both agriculture and industry. By the 1970s, Maoist China had surpassed the United Kingdom in steel production, demonstrating that China was not solely reliant on agriculture, but had also developed a strong industrial base. Maoist China developed both heavy and light industry, which grew steadily from the 1960s through the 1970s. Section 2. Accusations of class collaborationism. Calling Maoism class collaborationist is a common trope among Hoxhaist arguments, but how true is this? Not at all. The quote-unquote collaboration with the petty bourgeoisie they speak of is not quote-unquote collaboration, but rather the proletarianizing of other oppressed classes in Chinese society. By the end of the transition period, all of these such classes had been liquidated and proletarianized. End quote. The class character of the Chinese Revolution. My opinion on the matter is in agreement with Comrade Hoxha, including his caveat, quote, a proletarian revolution, such as the Great October Socialist Revolution was considered to be and was not carried out in China. Here I am not raising the issue that the stages of the bourgeois revolution ought to have been skipped over, allowing the transition directly to the socialist revolution. End quote. I do not wish to argue that Mao shouldn't have fought, that the CPC should have become pacifists, or that they shouldn't have organized to begin with. I do, however, wish to beat back the accusations, if I may borrow a phrase, against Hoxha's firm Marxist-Leninist line and the accusation that Mao was, in any way, more than a social democrat with vapid but nice-sounding left phraseology, akin to Che Guevara, which has no spine of Leninism. This collaborationist core of Maoist China begins with the quote-unquote theory of a new democracy, and the idea of new democracy is merely that first line in the two lines written about by Stalin. The national bourgeoisie were eager for a liberal bourgeois revolution, which would lift the international yoke, but they trembled at the idea of only having that for a limited time. Just as the Cadet Party was eager to throw off the feudal and peasant system of society to establish a liberal bourgeois Russia, the national bourgeoisie too saw an opportunity in China. Rather than break with their Cadet Party, the CPC embraced them. Quote, it can thus be affirmed that China's new politics are the politics of new democracy, that China's new economy is the economy of new democracy, and that China's new culture is the culture of new democracy, end quote. Continuing in this work, Mao adopts third positionist ideas and methods by saying, quote, this new democratic republic will be different from the old European-American form of capitalist republic under bourgeois dictatorship, which is the old democratic form and already out of date. On the other hand, it will also be different from the socialist republic of the Soviet type under the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is already flourishing in the USSR, and which moreover will be established in all the capitalist countries and will undoubtedly become the dominant form of state and governmental structure in all the industrially advanced countries. However, for a certain historical period, this form is not suitable for the revolutions in the colonial and semi-colonial countries. During this period, therefore, a third form of state must be adopted in the revolutions of all colonial and semi-colonial countries, namely the new democratic republic. This form suits a certain historical period and is therefore transitional. Nevertheless, it is a form which is necessary and cannot be dispensed with. End quote. He makes the absurd claim that Marxism-Leninism is not applicable universally, as opposed to Comrade Stalin, and so for the colonial and semi-colonial nations a quote-unquote new democracy is needed, based on class collaboration and not on the Soviet-style dictatorship of the proletariat. Mao engages in adventurism and rejects Leninism when he says this, and asserts that he, not Comrade Lenin or Stalin, has found a method to develop into socialism. The phony communism of Mao Zedong. The bourgeois character of the revolution and its lack of a Marxist-Leninist backbone is investigated by Comrade Hoxha in Can the Chinese Revolution Be Called a Proletarian Revolution?, a work that many Maoists attest to having read, our comrades at the MSc do as well, yet that shows the shallowness of their understanding. Hoxha writes, quote, "For the period following the liberation of China, the question arises, and this is a great and important question which cannot be analyzed and solved with these few facts and documents or without special study on our part. Is People's China building socialism on the Marxist-Leninist road, or is it a bourgeois democratic republic and remaining as such? Was the revolution which was carried out in China, and did it remain, a bourgeois democratic revolution which marked the first stage of the revolution, or did it succeed in going beyond this stage, to the second stage of the revolution, to socialism under the dictatorship of the proletariat?" End quote. To which I feel obligated to preemptively answer no. It neither proceeded along a Marxist-Leninist line, nor did it progress beyond bourgeoisie liberalism, despite Mao's attempt at mystifying this by claiming, quote, "In this era, post-October Revolution, any revolution in a colony or semi-colony that is directed against imperialism, i.e. against the international bourgeoisie or international capitalism, no longer comes within the old category of the bourgeois democratic world revolution, but within a new category. It is no longer part of the old bourgeois or capitalist world revolution, but it is part of the new world revolution, the proletarian socialist world revolution. Such revolutionary colonies and semi-colonies can no longer be regarded as allies of the counter-revolutionary front of world capitalism. They have become allies of the revolutionary front of world socialism." End quote. Hoxha answers his question saying, quote, "Mao Zedong called the period of liberation, quote-unquote, the new democracy, the tasks and orientations of which were defined. The theoretical foundations of this doctrine were laid out by Mao Zedong in a document called the New Democracy, which came out in 1940. According to Mao Zedong, the new democracy is a regime suitable to China and resembles neither the Western republics controlled by the bourgeoisie nor the Soviet proletarian republics. The new democratic republic, according to Mao Zedong, will be made up of 4 anti-imperialist and anti-feudal classes, which are the proletariat, the peasantry, the petty bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie. In this republic, the economy also had to be new democratic. The state would take over management of it, but it would not confiscate the assets of the bourgeoisie, because the backwards character of the Chinese economy justified the existence of some capitalist forms. Of course, the land would be divided up, according to this new economy, but the economy of the rich peasants would exist because the above formula is applicable to the rich peasants also, since their production is very necessary. Naturally, the new culture has to be the ideological reflection of this new policy and new economy, and serve the policy and economy. This policy sounds liberal and nationalist because even after the creation of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong still remained loyal to his doctrine. In my opinion, and as far as I can judge, China carried out a bourgeois democratic revolution of a new type through the national liberation armed struggle." End quote. Ibidem, page 41. Which is an assessment I have no objection to, and continuing, quote, "After the victory of the bourgeois democratic revolution, the Communist Party of China had to proceed with great caution, and this was natural. It had to avoid being leftist and skipping the stages, and we can say that the stages were not skipped. This is a fact which cannot be denied. The question arose also that the Communist Party of China ought not to have shown itself to be quote-unquote democratic, that is, liberal and opportunist, as it proved to be, towards the Chinese bourgeoisie and the big landowners. The fact is that both the Liu Deng faction and the Mao faction supported these classes, making serious liberal opportunist concessions to them." End quote. My conclusion is a simple one. Mao was a progressive liberal. Likewise, his theories are of a bourgeois and adventurist character. We Hoxhaists reject the label of Marxist-Leninist that is attributed to Mao by himself and his followers, and this ideological position has made many true Marxist-Leninists stumble assuming, of course, Mao was a Marxist-Leninist, without a proper investigation of his theories or praxis. Reject all revisionists of the 20th century. Embrace Engels, Marx, Lenin, and Stalin.